The history of this kata, like many, has a good degree of vagueness, and my commentary here is based on a consensus of my readings, training the kata, and talking with karate historian Hanshi Sells, who is the author of the karate history book Unante. So in pooling all of this, my comments attempt to stay more on the side of possibility, rather than stating it is exactly this or that in terms of how the kata evolved. It appears that the kata was most likely spread to shito and other lineages via Sokon Matsumura, who lived from 1809 to 1902. In particular, the historical notes point to him having learnt this from a Chinese sailor who was possibly shipwrecked on Okinawa. However, it has been pointed out to me that this Chinese figure, who is often referred to as either Chinto or Anan, of course katas exist on both of these names today, likely taught a small number of other karate masters of the 1800s, and its spread through Okinawa may have in fact been by more than just Matsumura. Some Okinawan research that emerged in the last few years through Hanshi Sells also suggests another translation of fighting to the east, as a name that may be related to Chinese origins of fighting towards the rising sun, the lore of that being something more noted as Chinese in origin, not Okinawan. Hanshi Sells has also suggested that any physical form of the kata and its links to China are essentially gone, as he has never seen or heard of any Fujian kata that is named anything like Chinto or looks anything like Chinto's form today. However, coming back now to shito, it is likely it spread from Matsumura to Itosu Uncle and then to Kenwa Mabuni, the founder of shito. Of course, Itosu Uncle was the sensei of Shotokan's founder, Funakoshi, and it was Funakoshi who made a different version of this kata and called it Gankaku, and is the form they still practice today in Shotokan. The story of the kata heritage I just outlined appears to have its chain of information, firstly from a newspaper article published around 1900, where Itosu Unko was interviewed. This article was then further spread via a quote of this source in a book by Zenryo Shimabukuro Sensei. Just as a note, we have a very deep and long article on our website on Shimabukuro Sensei, authored by Hanshi Sells. Well worth a look if you're interested in that sensei and some of his history on karate. It does seem then that from Shimabukuro Sensei's book that these origins were then further popularized through an article placed in Black Belt magazine some decades ago, which was written by the late Richard Kim Sensei. Like many kata today, there are different variations as many masters have got their hands on it and added their spin to the kata. As we will discuss in this video, some of the kata look quite similar on the surface, but in this case the kata variations can actually result in quite different bunkai. I compare our lineage of shito to that of Saito shito as one example, and we'll get to that as we get further in the video. Gichin Funakoshi changed the name of the kata to Gankaku, which means crane on a rock, and this reflects the stance that really personifies that name, which is repeated 3 times within the kata. Additionally though, Funakoshi's change of the name was to align with more of Japanese culture by giving it a Japanese name, something he did to a large degree to help the acceptance of karate within the main islands of Japan when he moved up there from Okinawa. This was given that Okinawan practices by the Japanese were viewed as primitive, maybe for lack of a better way to define the mindset. The original kanji are more often translated as fighting to the east, and that is the translation that shito uses, and of course has the links to the rumoured stranded sailor. In our shito curriculum, it is a kata that is not focused on by many, and certainly not often seen done by those below sandan. Chinto is one of the hardest katas in our style to perform, given its crane stances and the tempo, which often aims to display rapid combinations flowing into and out of those crane stances. The timing of these difficult parts of the kata can of course be personalized, such that the crane stance sections do not flow so quickly and work the kihon of the technique within the form. And there is a reasonable assumption that one may eventually make the section flow rapidly after having settled in on the kata as a primary choice over a few years. Such breaks in timing can be used within kata as a gradual learning progression, but also a combination of the Japanese terms of kuzure and henka can be related to the approach. Other terms such as yaware and the Okinawan term ijiki. While these terms may be often part of the shuhari we see of people travelling along a path towards mastery of technique through expression in kata, they are also implemented in ways that promote learning. So in a Japanese dojo, kuzure can mean to collapse or break apart, i.e. maybe do components in a more isolated fashion or timing that slows them down to accentuate certain parts. Henka simply means change or variation, different ways the kata can be done, different bunkai in particular. In comparison, yaware translates to slowly or passively. So again, you may slow the timing down to accentuate the breathing, the balance, or the muscle control. Okinawan terms like ijiki imply lively, fast, and snapping technique, which obviously the technique can be done that way as well. I'm a big advocate of personalization of kata, and my sensei over the years have really guided me in the same regard. This tempo or personalization can bring soul into kata, and also allow you to work different themes, emphasize different biomechanical approaches over a lifetime of study, and it can reflect your own journey and exploration of karate. Of course, in our style, especially above 6 dan, personalization of kata can become quite radical. As an example, I'm going to play a clip here in a second that shows Tani Sensei in his later years doing the kata this video is about, Chinto. You will see how radical it actually is. Regardless of the henka around kata and its timing, a core theme for this kata is balance. And as we have articulated in other resources on kata, such as our videos and articles, kata names do often reflect the theme within the kata, such as Seienshin and Basai Dai for shito-ru. The Okinawan arts using the term Chinto to define this kata really does not tie to the theme. However, in Shotokan's case, Funakoshi renamed it to Gankaku, which arguably therefore has a direct link to a physical component of the kata and the name. Because I believe heritage clarification is important when passing on kata, I will spend a moment to go through my one person of separation from the Bunkai Kenwa and other sources that have pulled this video together. All the individuals on the screen have trained and lived in Japan and are responsible for my direct lineage in terms of absorbing the kata. I trained directly with Sotokawa Sensei while living in Japan, and he was a sensei who was either exposed to it directly through Kenwa Mabuni and or Tani Sensei, who founded Taniha or Shukukai. However, prior to my time with Sotokawa Sensei, I first learnt the kata Chinto from Greg Story Shihan, who has lived most of his life in Japan and received his 5th dan while living and training in Japan in 1985, a feat in that era that few Westerners had achieved. Today he still resides in Japan and continues his karate training there. Additionally, In recent years, I've had the fortune of doing some training with Hanshi Sells, who is a direct student of both Fumio Demura and Kenzo Mabuni. So in regards to this kata, I've also had exposure to the Saito Shito version, or the Mabuni family line version, through Hanshi Sells. In the history I've just walked through, and some of the coming reflections on Bunkai, in particular the Bunkai that's not our core Ruha's way of doing it, much of what I have conveyed has been derived from my conversations or training with Hanshi Sells. Given receiving information from Hanshi is like drinking from a fire hose, I may well not be replicating all he has passed to me as a pure clone. However, I've done my best to do so, and any errors are mine alone.
One more time, one movement there. Moving through the kata now, section by section. For our style, we start with our classic Musubidachi, hands together. Then from here we come out, bend that iron bar, gripping the floor, sinking to the hara. Usual style. Right leg goes back. This is a shito uke, but it is supported on the back side. So it's not classic, say, X block upwards, it's a shito uke, supported out with the right hand behind. From here, turn, the hands come down to the center. Tetsui, and then punch through to here. Now it's not in the hand position here that we do in our Haifanishin kata, actually punches through further. Then from here we spin, and get under eye on the other side. All in shito dash. Now, the height at which this punch comes through, our bunkai, when you look at the way our style approaches it, we have the whole idea of covering for a right hand hook, which stats will say is the most likely thing you've got to deal with. Bending down, coming through, then coming over the top and impacting. So chudan, especially when you're in a low stance, doesn't necessarily makes sense to be the impact point. So sometimes we'll punch a little bit higher, and I've seen other styles do the same as well. And of course, that's more like a chest height, assuming that you've pulled your opponent's head down to about this height. Now that's going to depend on, of course, your opponent's height, how far you've dropped your stance, how far you've pulled it in, all of those things combined. But for my own approach, it wouldn't bother me if one of our practitioners was punching here, classic solar plex height, or whether they're just a little bit higher at chest.
That's the fast one.
Alright, digging into alternates in the kata now for the higher ranks and some of the more classical interpretations. So again, just as a reminder, for our style here, we'll do a right hook from Stu coming at me. So right hooks, I colour, we come into here in some fashion, we hit into here, and we take down this one. You just saw Sensei Greg working with Sensei Gary on that application. One of the more classical ones, and I'll talk to a moment why we don't typically use this classical one. From here is it's a lapel grab this time with the right hand. The lapel comes in, I come over the top, twist the hands, arm bar down, strike, wrap around, come through for my position in here, however I need to get for the second action. Okay, so what you've got is cover the incoming lapel, pull the arm down. Here is an arm bar. Strike, impact after that. So one more time, he comes in, bridge, cut, take down, strike in here, turn and grab this way is fine to come straight in. You can twist them back if you like. There's a whole variety of ways you may follow on to that point. Alright. Now coming back to why we don't do that, remember we try and do an evidence-based approach to Bunkai. And with this scenario, the way the kata opens, the right side of his body is not the side he would grab with the lapel. The statistics are very clear. Right? The number 2 of the top 3 are push, hit, or grab, hit. 9 out of 10 people are right-handed. They will grab you with their left, they will punch with the right. So leading with a right grab, that's a very unlikely occurrence in the street to happen. You're going to be unlucky if that's what happens. So we tend to bias and drill the things that are right, and most likely, you're going to get in 10 street fights before someone's probably going to attack that way. It's going to be the other way around. The other reason, as you know, is the armbar. Right? So the statistics on arm bars and medical injuries in the streets, they don't seem to happen when you look at the emergency and the police reports. Right, on top of that, the litmus test is look at UFC cage fighting. How often do you see one UFC guy take another to the ground with a arm bar on one side while both parties are standing? It doesn't happen. Happens in law enforcement when the guys are not really fighting back. There's a whole psychology section there we've got in the textbook that covers off on why it's a law enforcement technique, not an act of physical violence against two males who are truly fighting. Right? And the UFC really drives that home that you don't see arm bars work to take another person down in this way. Right? Hence we work on the Bunkai dealing with a right hook, coming in and around, and then following on from there.